Good morning, everyone. Yes, as several of us have mentioned, there might be a little confusion, but the great news is that this wonderful meeting today with this presentation by Rosemary Keevil will be online. So it is my pleasure to introduce Rosemary, who's been a TV news reporter, a current affairs radio show host, and managing editor of a professional women's magazine. She has a master's degree in journalism and is currently a journalist covering addiction and recovery. Rosemary has two grown daughters who are content in their chosen careers. She lives in Whistler, British Columbia, Canada, with her partner and a sheepadoodle. I hope we have a moment later for you to tell us about that. Rosemary has been clean and sober since 2002, and for that, we offer her a huge congratulations. So please help me welcome to our Midday Rotary Club, Rosemary Keevil, presenting The Art of Losing It. Rosemary?
There, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for having me here today. I've had the pleasure of joining in on a couple of the meetings, and one of them was Nori last week, and then Mario Hernandez a few weeks ago. I'm probably not saying that correctly, but anyway, they were all very interesting, and they're hard acts to follow. Plus, the content of my presentation is quite a bit different, but I do appreciate being asked to talk here. And as I said, I've heard wonderful things about San Miguel, and I can't wait to get there. I know that there's a lot of Canadians there, and I look forward to the opportunity to do that if we ever can get out of the country and get back and forth, if things ever return to some sense of normalcy. Anyway, I'll get on with it. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book. I'm going to do 4 short readings, or about a minute and a half each, and then I'll talk a little bit more, and we can open it up to questions. The book, The Art of Losing It, a memoir of grief and addiction, is in 2 parts. The first part is about grief, and that's the part where my husband and my brother die within the same year. That was 1991, and they were both 41 years old, and my daughters were 3 and 5 when they died. And the agony and the pain of losing a loved one is a universal experience, but our culture is not really very good at dealing with that. Other cultures are. There's probably an element in the Mexican culture that has a better, more healthier way of dealing with it. People just don't know what to do with loss and grief, either our own or other people's loss and grief. And this can lead to chronic depression and anxiety and addiction, as guilty as charged. I lost 2 loved ones, and then I almost lost myself. So I perfected the art of losing it. I didn't lose my life, so I'm one of the fortunate ones, because addicts and alcoholics can lose their lives. So I'm one of the lucky ones. Part 2 is about my addiction and my time in rehab in my first year of sobriety. After my brother and my husband died, I held it together somewhat for 6 years. And then I succumbed to alcohol and drugs for 6 years. And I was what you call a high functioning alcoholic, which is really just a polite term for someone who can also go to work, but high functioning may be a bit of a stretch. In any event, as was mentioned earlier, I got clean and sober. It was May 3rd, 2002, and have been ever since. And one thing I know about both grief and addiction is that the only way past it is through it. With grief, we have to learn to let ourselves grieve. And with addiction, we have to understand why we're numbing ourselves and then work through that. And both of these, it's very important to have acceptance of both those facts. So I will talk a little bit more about that after the readings. But my hope is that this book can act as a resource for anyone who's suffering from, or who knows anyone who's suffering from grief and addiction, and shows that, you know, you can actually get through it and be okay. If I'm any sense of someone who's actually okay, I'm doing okay. I'm definitely a work in progress. So let me get on to the readings. Oh, before I do that, before I go into a reading, I'd like to just explain where I am. I'm in a house in Whistler, and this house was being built when my husband was dying in 1991. So he was in the hospital a lot. So I would take samples to the hospital of tiles and door handles and carpets. And we would choose them. And so it was one of the things that kept him going. And thank goodness he got to see it finished. He wrote this diary of the last 2 months of his life. And in it he wrote, "This place will always remain a special pride to me, and one I hope that Rosemary and the kids will enjoy for a long, long time." And it is truly a gift, this diary. He says in it that he was putting together his files and his photos and things and trying to get things organized for me because he knew he was dying. And then he realized that maybe if he put his thoughts and feelings together in a diary instead of organizing his 1986 car insurance, it might be more interesting for Rosemary to read afterwards. And it truly reads as a love story. It exudes love and adoration for me and appreciation. So it's really a gift. So anyway, the first reading is an example of what it was, how grueling it was to be guiding my brother and my husband to their deaths at the same time. And I think the only introduction that we need for this is that Rob, my brother, is in Vancouver General Hospital. He's dying of AIDS, and my husband, Barry, is dying of cancer. Okay. The next day, Barry and I head out to the hospital in Billingham for his MRI. It happens that Vancouver General is on the way to the border. So I asked Barry if we can stop at VGH so I can give Rob a quick smoke break. He politely agrees. I arrive to do my duty, and Rob is duly grateful as we head back out to the smokers area. I strain to make congenial conversation with the other 6 smokers, and even Rob, who knows that Barry is waiting in the car for me so we can go to Billingham for yet another medical test. I keep a watchful eye on Rob's cigarette as it burns toward the filter. Each puff makes the glowing ember creep closer and closer to my release. When it looks like there is no more tobacco and Rob is about to smoke the filter, he takes one last lingering puff, relishing the hot nicotine as it gushes down his throat, through his windpipe, and to the farthest recesses of his lungs. As he stubs out the butt, I eagerly make a motion to leave, and he lights up another. So the next reading is also from part 1 of the book, and I took Barry to the hospital a lot during these 7 or 8 months that he was dying, back and forth from home to the hospital. And this one time he was so in such bad shape, I couldn't take him myself. The ambulance was called to take him to the hospital. So in this reading, Willow, my daughter, is 5, almost 5, and Dixie, the other daughter, is 2.5. And this is, well, this will be self-explanatory. Willow and Dixie are looking out the front window as the ambulance pulls into the driveway, mesmerized by the big white and red vehicle with a red light on top, which is not flashing, that has come to take their daddy away. My motherly instincts make me desperately want to shelter them from all of this, but I can't. I can't cushion them from this harsh reality. I watch the ambulance attendants readying the gurney. I see 2 little girls grappling with a tangle of new emotions, and I know that their innocence will shield them for only so long. This is something none of us can escape from, and it will leave an indelible mark on our souls. It's almost as difficult watching them flounder as it is watching my husband die. What must this be like for their little 2-year-old and 5-year-old minds and hearts? What are they thinking? As if she hears my ponderings, Willow looks up at me and says, "Is Daddy going to die today?" Oh. So the first reading in part 2 is I'm meeting with my spiritual counselor. Now, as I said, part one is the grieving, part two is the addiction, the is the addiction and the rehab and the first year of recovery. So this first reading is from the beginning of part two, and I am with my spiritual counselor. So. Okay. Her name is Sheena. She talks gently, her words emerging slowly from her like thick cream, the kind you get at high tea with scones and strawberry preserves. She has a reassuring half smile that does not expose her teeth. She's older than my 47 years, but ages really. She wears flat, round-toed, sensible black shoes and a single string of white pearls. Her hair, brown with hints of gray, is pulled back from her face in a bun. She has luminous blue eyes that seem to peer right into my soul. I feel exposed but protected in the same time. I speak up. I drank a lot of wine, took a couple of sleeping pills, and drove the kids. My kids and my girls, they're only 13 and 15. I did $4,000 worth of damage to the clutch on the car. I pause and shake my head and let the tears gush out as I finish my confession. I almost lost the family dog, and I blacked out at the wheel. It's a miracle I didn't have an accident. Then I got a letter from the police that I was seen driving erratically, and I'm wondering, well, I pause and wonder exactly what am I wondering? I get up my nerve and finish my thought. Do you think I need a spiritual retreat? Keeping her eyes on mine, Sheena rolls her chair closer so she's about 3 feet from me. I've squeezed myself into the corner of what feels like the proverbial psychiatrist's couch. Rosemary, what about rehab? She asks. That's quite a concept, isn't it? What about rehab? So the final reading is from Rehab, and I'm in group therapy, and Graham is the facilitator. So where are we? Good morning, group. Graham starts with the session with his usual salutation. Then he walks over to the whiteboard and writes, "The problem is not the problem. The problem is coping with the problem." He reads his words aloud and continues. Today, we are going into our wall of defenses, those behaviors that keep you from being intimate and genuine. Rosemary, why don't you give it a go? You said you finished this assignment, right? Graham nods for me to come to the board and holds out the marker. So then I go to the board and I start writing things up on the board. As I look at my growing wall of defenses, humor, sarcasm, running, swimming, shopping, and sensitivity, I'm shocked by how at ease I am with all these people, once complete strangers, exposing my dysfunctional coping mechanisms. It's like giving birth. All is so exposed, there's nothing else left to be apprehensive about. What about making yourself too busy to stop and think about anything, let alone feelings? Celia asks. I think I do. Yes, guilty as charged, I interrupt. And Graham says, anything else? Sex? Darlene asks. Sex? I'm surprised. I'm not addicted to sex. Yes, but do you use it to mask feelings? Graham asks. I think about this. There was this one Greek fellow who I called up between relationships. That was a distraction, I guess, a way of coping with emotions I didn't want to deal with. That's exactly right. I had too busy and sex to the list. That looks like a pretty sturdy brick wall of defenses, Graham says, and gestures for me to take a seat. So yeah, there you have it. You have a lot of me. The only way past it is through it. And that's me getting through it. But I'm living proof that you can get through all of that, the addiction and the grief, and actually be okay. It's something to remember if you are someone you love is suffering through grief and addiction. So that's a takeaway. A big takeaway for me is acceptance. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is the guru of grief, and she outlines 5 stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And processing grief is exhausting. It's important to accept that and give yourself plenty of rest, self-care, let yourself have breakdowns, and seek support through loved ones and people who care about you. And I found professional support would be quite helpful. And also give yourself plenty of time. Death of a loved one really digs a hole in the soul, a profound hole in the soul. And it will eventually, the edges of that hole will soften with time, but will never really go away. But time does help, time and therapy. And with addiction, it was really important for me to accept my shame and my guilt. And to find out the reasons why I was numbing myself and to work through those issues. So that takes acceptance first. And the reasons for me, of course, were extreme sadness and the stress of parenting two very sad and confused little girls. And I didn't actually grieve until I was clean and sober. And for me, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous were really very powerful. And I understand that they're not necessarily for everybody. But there are elements of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous that are quite powerful and helpful. And they are dealing with the wreckage of the past. That's facing your demons. And that means dealing with resentment and making amends to people you've harmed. And again, like the only way past it is through it. It's what happens next that's important. It's important to try, and I do still try to do the next right thing, but I'm also still a work in progress. But that's sort of my point in the book. I'll read the last paragraph of the book. It's kind of like what now that matters. I know
Rosemary, while you get ready to do that, I'm going to remind everyone that if you have any questions or comments, you can use our chat section to please place any comments or questions there, and we'll be reading them at the end. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I know I cannot change the past. I know I will never lose my sadness over the death of my husband and the death of my brother. I will never lose the guilt I have over how I parented the girls in the absence of their dad, but I have acceptance. It's what I'm doing about it today that matters. So that's an important takeaway for me. And as I said, hopefully a message is that if anyone suffering from the same grief or addiction or both, you too can actually make it through and be okay. But it's a rocky road. And that's the end of the official part of my presentation. It wasn't as long as it was supposed to be, but I do have a couple of other areas I was going to talk about if I do that while we're waiting for questions. Should I know?
Yes, I've got a couple of questions, but I'm going to take a second also to remind everyone, since we're not using the regular Rotary link, those of you who have just joined us, please mute your screens. I don't have the control and the ability to do that. So there's a couple of people that just joined the call. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. So Rosemary, here in San Miguel de Allende, as you know, we have many different non-for-profits or NGOs, as we call them here. And as a matter of fact, we have someone on the line right now with us who is Lee Carter, and he heads up a non-for-profit that's called Mitigare, that is basically deals with end of life. They have a thanatologist on board. And we many times at Patronato Pro Niños also deal with the death of a child. As a matter of fact, last week, we had an unfortunate situation with a 14-year-old. So in keeping that in mind and knowing that I work closely with children, I have a couple of questions for you, if you would indulge. How did you help your children in going through that grieving process? Can you elaborate on that?
Right. Well, at the local bookstore, I bought so many books on grieving that the checkout lady asked if I was working in the palliative care unit. I really wanted to find out how to help these children through that. They were 3 and 5 at the time. And I did learn that they really need to an outlet for their feelings, that anyone who's helping take care of them, any caregivers, teachers, or family members or friends that are helping to look after the children, really need to understand that the children have to have an outlet, either through talking is best, but art and writing, and really need to talk a lot about the loved one that they've lost. I also learned that the different ages have different understanding of finality of death. The 3-year-old, we were in the grocery store. We're standing by the cans of beans, and she's looking up at me at the stranger beside us, and she says to the stranger beside us, "It's my birthday and my daddy's dead, dead, dead." And she just didn't really have a concept of the gravity of that, but obviously she had the feeling of it, but not wasn't cognizant of that. But the 5-year-old at the same time, just 2 years difference, she said to me one day, "Mom, who should I tell about that daddy died?" So there was that much difference. So it's important to understand that the different stages of their development, they will have different understanding of the finality of death. And then that's how I help them through it. But I don't know, did you ask about them, what happened when they were 13 and 15 when I got sober?
I was going to ask you about that in reading a little bit about your work. What was it like for the children when you eventually got sober? Because, you know, you were both going through some very different experiences at the very same time.
Yeah. Well, as I said, they were 13 and 15, and you would think once I finally got sober that everything would be good now. Well, it was as if a wrench had been thrown into the dysfunctional family system. I all of a sudden, I changed. Yes, I was sober, but I was, all of a sudden I had rules and curfews, which was something I did not have before. So they were just totally flabbergasted as to why all of a sudden I had rules. And one of them at one point just said to me, "I just wish you'd never got sober," which is kind of an amazing thing to hear when you're newly clean and sober after having been self-destructing for 6 years. And finally thinking you're giving yourself and everybody a gift, and then have someone say, your 13-year-old say to you, "I just wish you weren't sober anymore." But what I'd learned was that my sobriety had introduced a brand new kind of chaos into our family system, that we had been functioning in a dysfunctional equilibrium, meaning it doesn't mean it wasn't chaotic. It just means that the behaviors of the people in the family system were predictable. And all of a sudden you throw in sobriety into that mix, and the behaviors are not predictable anymore. So sobriety actually threatened this dysfunctional equilibrium. So it's been tough, and it's a work in progress. And today, I'm proud to say they're both doing well. They have had rocky roads as their stories to tell, but they're in happy marriages and fulfilling careers. But it's been a rocky roads, I have to say. But thank you for the question.
I'm sure. And do they live in Canada as well?
Yeah, they both live in Vancouver.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So Skip, I sent you a message. I don't know if you can hear us. I know that you were getting ready for some questions for Rosemary as well. I see Skip coming back to life. There he is.
I've been right here and
Okay.
and very, very captivated by the whole thing. Now, if anybody has any questions, Rosemary, I want to make sure, did you have anything more that you wanted to add before we got into the question and answer period of this?
No, that's great.
You all set? Okay. Well, I have a question. So the book that you wrote, The Art of Losing It, I assume it's available at bookstores now, correct?
And Amazon, yes.
Oh, you can get it on Amazon. All right. All right.
Wonderful.
Very good. All right. So at this stage of the game, folks, if anybody has got any questions, feel free to jump in right now, unmute and ask them. Raise your hand first, or put something in the chat box. Okay.
I love it when we have a small group of people, because we can actually have the luxury of unmuting ourselves if we so feel compelled to do so. When we have, so many more people on board, it's very difficult to do that. So yes, please, Rotarians, we've got Rosemary still here with us. So if anyone has any comments or questions, I know that like I mentioned earlier, Lee Carter and sometimes the president of the Mitigare, Martha Hamill, joins us on the call. And I know that we deal with these situations day in and day out. And as you did mention earlier, Rosemary, interestingly, this country does have a very different way of dealing with death, this culture in general. I can tell you that I was very taken from day one when I arrived here. I arrived in the month of March in 2015. And that October, end of October, beginning of November, folks were getting ready for what they call the Day of the Dead celebrations, El Día del Muerto. And some folks might not know this, but November 1st is the day in which we celebrate the angels that have died, meaning the innocent children. And then the 2nd of November is for adults. So at Patronato, we do an entire, beautiful setup there with our altar. And so the girls in the office were getting that ready, and I see these beautiful pictures of babies and toddlers and, maybe even some teenagers. And so innocently, I go up to the group that was preparing that, and I ask them, who are these children? And they say to me, they're all the children that Patronato tried to save, but have passed away. Well, I have to tell you, that was really hard to hear. And so, then I realized that the way they handle it by celebrating the life that those children had really helped with the pain a lot. And so in my own losses in my own life, last year being probably the hardest, losing my mother, I learned that here, that continuous celebration of who the being was certainly does help. So it is beautiful.
It's just so much healthier.
Yeah. Ivar, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Rosemary, this was very interesting to listen to. I lost my father to cancer. Now it's many years ago, and I was in my 40s when it happened. But the last couple of days, sitting in his bedside, I didn't know what to do, what to say. What do you say in that situation? He could hardly speak. He could say a few things, but actually not very much. And you sit there and feel dumb because you don't know what to say to your own father in that situation. We will take good care of our mother, don't worry, or whatever it could be. I have thought about this actually many times since he died, and still I haven't found the answer. What should I have done in that situation?
Well, it just reminds me of when Barry was actually dying, and he was, like he was on his way out, and you knew he was dying, but this wasn't a matter of days, it was a matter of probably only like minutes, but it just throws me back to this time. And I had gathered up his family around in the house, and he was in the bed, and I had called them over because it was the weekend. I knew he was coming home to die. We kind of just knew he was dying. This is sort of another story, but as you know when they're dying, and you know when they're on their way out. And so I called everyone into the bedroom, and we were guiding him into death. And I was saying to him, you've fought a beautiful journey. You've been a wonderful father and a wonderful husband, and you've led a beautiful life, and we're all fortunate to have had you. Now go safely into your journey and finally have some peace. So I was guiding him and giving him permission to go. Now this would be different over a 2-day period, but it might be the same kind of idea. It's kind of, you can stop fighting, right? You can let go.
Right.
Yes, but I understand, of course, what you're saying. 2021 is very different from something that happened 40 years ago, when talking about death was almost a taboo, not a subject that you talk about. And that's what made it difficult, because if I was going to say something to my father in that situation, that would be the same to say, Dad, I know you're on your way out.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say that. I still had the hope that he would survive. He didn't.
Oh,
Well, basically, I knew he wouldn't. But
yeah.
the whole situation, I didn't have control of that situation, not at all.
Rosemary,
Well,
one of our wonderful members is also asking us, and apropos to Ivar's point, that in your opinion, what might be some of the differences of this feeling of death among the countries, the different countries? For example, Ivar is from Denmark, you being Canadian. I just mentioned here in Mexico what we do. Differences between some of the countries and how we deal with death. In your opinion?
Well, I think, as you say, some of the Mexican approach is a little bit healthier, and I think our modern Western culture today still isn't that good at it. Although, as Ivar, is that how I say your name, Ivar, was saying,
Yeah.
40 years ago, it was even more difficult than it is today. So I think it's more of a like a Western culture versus, I think that when you mentioned the Mexican part, it may have been kind of the indigenous part coming through there, which may have been a bit healthier. But I think there's not a lot of difference in a lot of the Western cultures and how we deal with grieving and loss. We're just sort of at a loss of what to do with it, but we're better than we used to be in that, but there's still a long way to go. I mean, I remember a woman when Barry had died was telling me how sad she was that her dog had died. It was kind of like, I felt sorry for the woman because she obviously didn't know what to say. That wasn't appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta wonder. Rosemary, in your book, The Art of Losing It, what is the it in losing it?
Well, the losing it is that I lost my husband and my brother. I almost lost myself. So that's what it was. It was I did lose two loved ones, but I almost lost I lost myself as well in the addiction and the drugs and the alcohol. I got lost. But the good news was I actually didn't lose my life. So it was, there was a whole history behind the choosing of the title, actually. but I kind of liked it. It was a bit irreverent. I kind of appealed to my irreverent self, the art of losing it. I can do it. I can lose it.
We have another comment here. And someone that's on the line with us says, I share your journey of sobriety and death of my husband. I found after many years that I finally got off the road of grief, and it did not take away from my memories, but left the devastation behind. Have you found the end of that journey?
The end of the devastation?
Well, I imagine the end of the devastation and of being able to be sober and leave all of that behind.
Yeah, I like to consider myself an act in like I'm in a process. I'm a work in progress. That's the expression. The devastation, and it is devastating to lose loved ones like that. As I said, the ragged whole the edges get soft, but I mean, it never goes away. I still get surprised by certain dates and things, like something is feeling a little bit off for some reason, and I realize, it's his birthday, and he died 30 years ago, but I'm somewhere it's a cellular, you feel it at a cellular level, and that never really goes away. So although the onslaught of the devastation goes away, the feelings at the cellular level does not, cellular level. And then the devastation of the addiction Well, a lot of that is just accepting. I mean, it's a major acceptance that I did those things. And then now I'm doing something different. So it's not about forgetting about it. It's about accepting it and addressing why I did those things and making amends, and not saying, oh, now it's okay. It's not okay, but I can't do anything about it. So the important thing is to try and do the next right thing, and trying to be a good mother today. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's what it brings up for me.
Well, you were
But
absolutely right in your comment earlier when you said that sometimes folks don't really know what to say. I had someone recently say to me, well, give yourself time. Your mom only passed away a few months ago. You'll see it'll be so much better once it's been 6 months. I thought, really? Okay, I'm going to mark that day on the calendar and see how I feel. It reminded me of the time that my daughter was just a newborn baby, and the doctor swore that when she was 3 months old, the colic would go away magically. It doesn't happen that way, right? Dates on a calendar, dates on a calendar.
All right.
But it's an example
Okay.
that people just don't know what to say.
Yeah.
6 months is like a
Right.
spit in the pan.
Well, Rosemary, I want to thank you on behalf of the Rotary Club of San Miguel de Allende for joining us today, and a very riveting presentation. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. And I don't have it available right now, but we will be sending you something that looks like that. You'll be getting it in an email. It's our certificate of appreciation. It'll be made out to you for your presentation to our club today. A donation of 10 polio immunizations will be made in your honor to the End Polio Now campaign. And when our club secretary gets back online, he'll make that up and shoot it off to you in the emails. So be
Well, I'd
looking
like
for
to
it.
thank you
It's
very
super-
much for having me. And I'd like to say I've never met such a gracious bunch of people. Thank you very much, as you guys down in
Wow.
San Miguel. And I
Come
can't
visit
wait
us,
to-
Rosemary. Come visit us whenever you'd like. Just
I
reach
can't
out.
wait to go
and,
down there, and hopefully
yes.
I'll be able to come to a meeting.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. And hopefully we'll be able to resume our meetings to a degree in person. The first one is scheduled. It'll be limited. Our capacity will only be 10 people, and that'll be on July the 6th. So it'll be a combination of online and in person. Want to thank
So
you.
is that- Sorry, that's going to be in person at San Miguel? My
Yeah.
daughter said to me she thought maybe an AA meeting was held in the same building. Is that possible? I
don't know. I don't know where the AA meetings are held in San Miguel, but we are going to be at the Ivar. Give me the name of that hotel again. It's HRM Hotel.
Real de Minas.
There it is. Real de
Minas.
Minas. Right. Very good. Yeah, that's going to be on the 6th of July. That's what we're targeting for. So thank you again, Rosemary, and all of you. Thank you for joining us today. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Nori.
Thank you. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you here.
You were great. You were
Oh,
great.
thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
My
very
pleasure.
much.
My pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye, you too.